So this computer's got to be shit. It identifies 3 guys capable of doing this mission, and the mission consists of parachuting, getting on a boat, and taking photos. So I know like at least 5 guys that could do that right now.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked out.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we ask, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday nights searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The audience selects from 4 movie choices, and we watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. Once again, this week we have a special guest, the King B, making a repeat performance after regaling us with his intense Blues Brothers knowledge last week.
I promise to have no Rambo knowledge this week.
At the end of each podcast, Big D and I will provide the audience with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off their respective bums. So find a comfortable spot on the sofa and accompany us for a journey through our vast VHS movie collection.
Yeah, so it's nice to have you back, B, again. Last week, for a rookie performance, I thought it was strong and merited a repeat appearance.
I'll tell you, I'm really glad to be back. It was terrifying. It's kind of like that Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights in his first interview with a win. I don't know what to do with my hands. So for all you guys that think you can just jump out there and go record a podcast, it's a lot more challenging than you'd expect. These guys do a lot of work, and it's clearly and quickly becoming evident how difficult it is.
So we're shifting this week from King B's area of expertise in the blues to an area of expertise for Big D, military rescues.
Yes. This movie was one of my favorites growing up. Watching it this time, I realized how much it shaped some of my adult life and maybe subconsciously affected my decision to join the military, even though I wasn't thinking of it then. But yes, military rescues. We had some classics. In last place was Missing in Action from 84, Iron Eagle 86, Under Siege from 92, and the winner, the epic Rambo First Blood Part 2 with a whopping 39% of the vote.
I'm kind of surprised actually that it was such a close race between Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Under Siege, which again I think we can all agree is a terrible movie. And all I can think about is it had to do with the cake scene in Under Siege. Everybody loves that.
No, I think people might have been trying to punk us. Sometimes they pick the movies that are obviously terrible. And First Blood, I used to put it on our voting blocks when we started out really early on. Predator and First Blood Part 2, I had it probably on like 5 or 6 votes. Never won. So thank you very much, listeners, for not sticking us with Seagal as a cook on a boat.
All right, so the overall plot breakdown of Rambo First Blood Part 2 is pretty simple. John Rambo is released from prison by the government for a top-secret covert mission to the last place on Earth he'd want to return, the jungles of Vietnam. It was a 1985 film that finished just behind Back to the Future in the box office take.
When I was looking at all the different movie options, I haven't seen any of these movies. I never watched them. Apparently, I did not care for war movies as a kid. The title always confused me. How could it be the first something if it's part 2?
Well, it's like Final Fantasy 15, you just roll with it. But yeah, Rambo First Blood Part 2 in second place in 1985 at the box office made $150 million, finishing only behind Back to the Future, which we'll be doing here very shortly, which made $210 million.
Yeah, very different movie from the first. First Blood was a very thought-provoking, sensitive movie that dealt with PTSD and soldiers returning from Vietnam. This one, even though they have some political commentary and they're still trying to bring awareness to the topic of POWs and Vietnam veterans, they did it in a very different way by blowing shit up and just going crazy.
So interestingly enough, this movie did come up in 85, which was, I was 5 years old at the time. And during the time, Iran was at war with Iraq. And so this was actually used as a training material for Iranian teens who were going into war. They didn't have like boot camp or anything like that. They would show them Rambo and then just kind of send them out to the battlefield in these like human wave tactics sort of things. So this was huge among Iranian Americans. I absolutely idolized Rambo. I did the headband thing, and I desperately wanted that Kobau necklace. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
If you get your girlfriend killed, you might get one for free.
Sorry, Kate.
So we always start off the podcast by talking about where we were when we watched it. Growing up in New York, my parents had a winter house up in the mountains in the Catskills. I'm not an outdoorsman, but I liked to go out as a kid and play in the woods. Rambo came out, my G.I. Joe fascination we discussed before. I would go in the woods. I would set traps. I would want to be like Rambo. I went out. I got my parents to buy me the Rambo survival knife, with the saw so you could cut through wood. It had the compass in the handle. It had some 550 cord, the nylon cord in it. If you open up the cap, there was like a survival kit. I think there was matches in the waterproof case, even fishing hooks, even though I didn't fish. So when Rambo came out, saw it one of the first nights it was open with my friends, went back the next day by myself and watched it. And I took it almost like you said, the Iranian kids. I was using it as a training video. I don't think I was as stealthy or as ripped as John Rambo, but I had as much fun.
I remember having survival knife envy. A neighborhood kid had that knife, and I didn't really care about the knife. I had a little pocket knife as a kid, but I really wanted to know what was inside that secret compartment. I always, hey man, just let me check that knife out, and he wouldn't share. He wasn't into it. Army movies were never a part of my youth. For me, it was always the lever action 22 and my little old timer folding pocket knife type stuff. That was my scene.
But Big D, if you'd ever been to King B's house, he's more than made up for it in recent times as far as a knife collection and just random assorted tools.
But what shocks me is you talked about the rodeo, and that crowd usually seems very patriotic. American flag, red, white, and blue. Toby Keith singing, woo, America. I would figure that crowd would have been tattooing John Rambo on their arm, pasting, just patriotic sayings on the back of their F-150 and just driving through town.
You're absolutely right. They are very America. These are the guys that they get tumescent over Lee Greenwood mixtapes. But at the same time, they're not into all them Vietnameses. They want to keep their America loving closer to home.
Hey, don't mock Proud to be an American. They play that at graduation for basic training. Like, I can't control the response. When that song comes on, I want to tear up. And I'm not the most patriotic guy out there, but when you graduate basic and you're listening to it, I can't explain what comes over me, but I just have tears of joy.
All right, so that's Rambo. Let's let the movie speak for itself. Big D, take us to the trailer.
Joined Army 6 June 69. Accepted Special Forces. Helicopter and language qualified. Expert in light weapons and guerrilla warfare. Sylvester Stallone is back as Rambo. Rambo's the best combat vet I've ever seen. His mission, to locate American POWs in Vietnam.
Think you'll find someone? POWs? Doubtful.
Come on, move in! His orders, not to engage the enemy.
He's got 36 hours to complete the mission and reach the extraction point. We're going down!
You're not going anywhere.
I'm telling you to abort. Double-crossed and left behind enemy lines.
You're the one who's making the mistake.
Yeah, what mistake?
Rambo.
And now, he's getting out any way he can. Rambo. What most people call hell, he calls home. No man, no law, no war can stop him. Sylvester Stallone is back. as Rambo. First Blood, Part 2.
3 years into his sentence, former commando John Rambo is visited by his old commander, Colonel Sam Troutman. With the war in Vietnam over, the public has become increasingly concerned over news that a small group of U.S. POWs have been left in enemy custody. To placate their demands for action, the U.S. government has authorized a solo infiltration mission to confirm the reports. As one of only 3 men suited for such work, Rambo agrees to undertake the operation in exchange for a pardon. He is taken to meet Marshal Murdoch, a bureaucratic government official overseeing the operation. Rambo is temporarily reinstated in the U.S. Army and instructed that he is only to photograph a possible camp and not to rescue any prisoners or engage enemy personnel, as they will be retrieved by a better-equipped extraction team upon his return.
So I think this prologue, it works great. We needed it. Even though the first movie in the series did well, it wasn't like this one. So maybe a lot of people hadn't seen it. We get to see John. He's in his prison camp. He's breaking rocks, so he's staying ripped, staying in good shape. The hair, it's majestic, it's flowing. I don't think, first of all, he got 5 years hard labor breaking rocks. He only killed one person in the first movie. And you could argue that throwing a rock at the helicopter indirectly led to the death. Yes, he did shoot up the town, but really, 5 years hard labor. And does Siberian-style labor camps even exist in the United States in 85?
Well, you got to remember, this is Reagan's America, so they're tough on crime at this point. In addition, they needed a reason to start off the movie with an explosion, so you thought you were in a war zone, but no, in fact, you're just at a prison camp where they're apparently using explosives around the prisoners. But what gets to me is the entire premise that a computer chose Rambo. So this computer's got to be shit. It identifies 3 guys capable of doing this mission, and the mission consists of parachuting, getting on a boat, and taking photos. So I know at least 5 guys that could do that right now. And they picked Rambo, which makes me wonder what the other 2 dudes, how badly did they fuck up? It's already a mess from the get-go, and I was looking at the movie sideways.
I wasn't really paying attention in 1985, but I got to question all the technology that they talk about in this movie because it just looked like a couple of big boxes with lights on them. What kind of operating system does this computer run? Is there just ticker tape feeding out one side that just types out Rambo and Morse code? I don't understand. And then when they talk about all the technology that keeps them safe, I don't really see any of that in this movie. And when he delivers his line, kind of like a sullen little kid, oh, I always thought the mind was the best weapon. I completely checked out of this movie about 5 minutes in.
I kind of feel for Rambo. Despite all this movie's faults, I think Stallone has that likability like he has in Rocky, where when he delivers that line, I felt the opposite. I was like, oh, poor guy.
Oh, I couldn't get into this performance at all. Rocky has a lot more energy. It's coming from the heart. Even though he's still kind of that slow talking physical guy, in this, he just seems simple. In his first line to Troutman when he's, do we get to win this time? God, you sound like Droopy Dog. Get out my face.
No, I loved it. He's a dick. He gets off the airplane at the military base. He's greeted, and they're like, hey, Rambo, great to work with you. He doesn't say a word. He just walks. He spends the first 5 minutes in camp not addressing a single person. I'm like, John, that's not the way you make friends. But I mentioned how in the first movie, he just killed one person with a rock. Every movie after that, the body count just went through the roof. So we had 1 in the first movie. In this movie, he kills 75. In Rambo 3, he kills 115. And in Rambo 4, he kills 256. When he was in Vietnam, he only had 59 confirmed kills. After Vietnam, he killed 450. So yes, the mind is the most proficient weapon. And he's trying to say that the human spirit, the fighting American drive. No. He killed more people with a knife and a bow and arrow than any machine gun.
What's important to remember here is that he's still pretty young in his career, too, because this is just Rambo First Blood Part 2. But his body's not that young. So when they're going over Rambo's file, the bureaucratic government official, Marshal Murdoch, he notes that Rambo was born in 1947 and was active in Vietnam in the 60s. So it's now 1985, which makes Rambo at least 37 years old. Stallone was born in 46, so this part's accurate, but he's pretty old to be doing this shit, and presumably, having been in prison, he hasn't even fired a gun in 3 years. Is this really the best guy to send?
Oh, 100%, because he's expendable. That's the most important thing. He's been breaking rocks, his cardio, he's fit, he's ripped, he's looking good. And I think he could do the job. You know, while he's going over that detailed dossier, there's an interesting line in there that is his heritage. He's Indian and German descent, which Murdoch then says that's a hell of a combination. What does that mean exactly? Does that explain why he's so proficient with a bow and arrow, or that he can track people? Why even throw that in there?
Those are just two savage peoples. Don't you know that? No, I mean, they found a way to slip in racism about 100 times during this movie, especially with just having anyone who looked remotely Asian play it Vietnamese.
Yeah, some of the lines later, they border on racist, and we'll talk about it with Ko. Yeah, she's not given the best lines in the movie, and they go a little heavy-handed in the stereotypical Vietnamese soldier and their broken English, which was a little uncomfortable. But this movie, what it did right and what it set the tone for years to come was the Rambo gearing up montage where you see all the weapons, you see the explosive tipped arrows, which sadly I learned in my teens was just a prop, that they didn't exist.
One of the interesting points about the dressing montage, a lot of movies have copied it, a lot of movies have lampooned it. It's still the best to date in my book. It's rivaled only by the Rocky IV training montage, which was also Sylvester Stallone. But in this, we should know immediately that Rambo has zero intention of just taking photos. He is taking a submachine gun, like a dozen knives, explosive tipped arrows. It's a tell to the audience that this guy, he's playing the military. The military ain't playing him.
Well, you figure he's got training on all those deadly weapons. Wouldn't you walk him through using that modern like SLR camera? I don't even know how to set the fucking f-stop or how to focus. You're going to send John in there, and if he did his job, he might come back with a set of like 14 blurry photos.
Can we do a quick inventory? Because I really was not that impressed with the montage. You get some sweaty Rambo. He's sharpening his knife. I feel like maybe he was moving the knife the wrong way on the stone. So he packs two little tiny stabby knives, one big knife, an SMG that looks like it had one magazine full of 9mm rounds, and he's got some Fujifilm. I didn't really see all the technology that they're really talking about in this movie that's supposed to keep him safe.
I think they're talking about the surveillance photos and the ability to track him and see movement, because every time later on during the escape from the camp, they cut back to Troutman, like looking at microfiche and like holding slides up to the light, and he's looking at pictures, but yet he doesn't know what he's looking for, and he looks kind of lost.
I'm just trying to figure out, in all of the technology they're talking about, was that a completely out of place Coke machine part of the technology that was designed to protect the soldiers?
That Coca-Cola machine is the most solid, genuine performance in this movie. That thing has seen some hard times, lonely times.
Yeah, but they're badasses because they don't even put coins in it. They just open that shit up like they got the key.
I mean, it does seem out of place, but when you think about it, again, getting back to the whole, they went overboard in trying to show you that Murdoch is this soft, bureaucratic guy who claims to have been in the Marines, but, Rambo calls that shit out immediately. And so, in essence, I think it's supposed to be a symbol of decadence in Thailand, is that they've got this Coke machine, I think it was like a peanut butter jelly sandwich, too. So during his insertion, Rambo's parachute becomes tangled and breaks, causing him to lose his guns and most of equipment, leaving him with only his knives and, of course, the bow with the specialized arrows. He meets his assigned contact, a young intelligence agent named Ko Bao, who arranges for a local river pirate band to take them upriver. Reaching the camp, Rambo spots one of the prisoners tied to a cross-shaped post, left to suffer from exposure, and rescues him against orders, though it's possible that he lost his camera with the rest of his equipment and couldn't follow his orders. During the escape, they're discovered by Vietnamese troops and attacked. When a gunboat manages to catch up, the pirates betray them out of fear. Rambo gets the POW and Ko Bao to safety, destroys the boat with a rocket-propelled grenade, and kills the pirates. When Rambo reaches the extraction point, the helicopter is ordered to abort by Murdoch, who claims Rambo has violated his orders. When Troutman confronts him, Murdoch also reveals that he never intended to save any POWs, if any should be found, but to leave them caught to save Congress the money it would take to buy their freedom and evade any possibility of further war.
Yeah, so Rambo, he's going to do a low-altitude jump, and I think they say 250 feet. I was airborne, and I think we used to jump at like 1,200 feet, which is fucking scary enough because you can see the ground. And the chute's pulled out, by a static line. He gets hung up. survives it, decides to cut off all of his gear with his straps around his arm and his back and the sling on his weapon. Wouldn't it have been easier to just reach out and cut that one cord that was holding him to the plane?
I thought that, or if the jump master would cut it for him, that might have been helpful as well. But what bothered me about this is that Rambo's static line doesn't deploy his parachute properly. And this is a thing that happens, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Big D, but it makes him what's known as a towed jumper. So if you jump from the back of a plane that opens from the rear, you potentially could survive, though many jumpers in that scenario would die from cuts or from broken necks from being flung around. But jumping from the side of the aircraft would slam you against the fuselage at at high speed, and that's like almost certainly a death sentence with your body getting broken against the side of the plane. He was kind of just hanging there, like it seemed kind of comfortable.
Yeah, but they really wanted to establish that, Rambo is superhuman. He can survive this. We shouldn't expect him to be injured like a mere mortal. And this is reinforced that when he lands, he can sense that there's that giant boa constrictor behind him sneaking up on him. He reaches around, grabs the snake, looks at it, and scares the snake. He doesn't even kill it, just looks at it, and the snake decides to go away. They wanted us to know right off the bat, Rambo is not to be messed with.
One of my big gripes about the snake scene is he's already holding that knife upside down, and he's trying to get the compass off his knife, and I don't understand why, because he's holding it upside down. He can clearly see the compass at the bottom of the knife. It's the middle of the day, and he's in a clearing, so he can see the sun. Why does this survival expert even need a compass? He knows what direction he's going.
Listen, you're not going to build that sweet-ass prop knife without putting it on display. They got to show us all the bells and whistles.
I mean, the movie's loaded with a misuse of weapons. So he loses everything but the bow and arrow. He didn't lose the bow or the arrows. He got both of those or any of his knives. So basically, he just lost his guns and his camera. And talk about the compass being misused. At one point, you've got guys that are about 200 yards away from him. He's running out in the open with a POW, and they're lobbing mortars at him. Like, nothing in this movie makes sense. Rambo and his POW pal are the only ones out there running. If only, like, those bad guys had some sort of a line-of-sight weapon that was accurate about 200 yards, like something with rifling to improve accuracy, and you could just point it and pull a trigger, that'd probably be really useful.
Yeah, but you were talking about the bow and arrow and the explosive tips is the only one that survived. How many fucking arrows did he have in that quiver? It only looked like he loaded up maybe 9 arrows, but he shoots at least probably 35, 40 people. And the sound that arrow makes, it's fantastic to watch. I could watch him sitting around just shooting at targets all day.
Okay, I think we need to get to Ko Bao because I want to talk about her a lot. So Ko Bao, if you forgot, she is she's actually a Singaporean actress, and she is his contact when he gets to Vietnam. When he lands, and she recognizes him, which immediately is blowing my mind. So she knows exactly what Rambo looks like, but he doesn't even know that she's a woman. I felt like they should have at least told Rambo who to look for in a country of 90 million people. And also, with his jumping so far off, how did he find her?
A bigger problem is he lands, like you said, he's been blown off track. He lands spots who could be a civilian. This could just be a farmer out in the middle of nowhere. And Rambo goes over and he's going to kill this person. Rambo is going to stab a farmer, and it just turns out to be his contact. I want to know what Rambo did in Vietnam. He might not be the great American soldier. He might be a war criminal.
You know, just to kind of change the focus here, can you imagine if that casting had gone down today? Like, can you imagine approaching an American actress who speaks English and going, hey, listen, so you're going to play this, Vietnamese contact, and we need you to speak English worse than short round.
Well, I think, imagine if we were going to do the Lone Ranger and we decided to make Tonto a white guy. Oh, wait, we just did that. Johnny Depp. They'd still do it today.
When he first offers to make a trade with that kid, I thought Johnny Depp is doing this right. So I'm okay with Johnny Depp's performance as Tonto.
I just want to point out that the actress who played Ko Bao, not American, actually from Singapore. So they at least Singapore's not that far from Vietnam.
Well, she definitely spoke English well.
Yes.
Whoa.
Not in the movie. I mean, she was an English-speaking person who was asked to do this incredibly humiliating thing.
God, did King B just say she's so well-spoken? This is going down the wrong path.
We got a well-spoken count at 1.
Yes.
But no,
not in the movie, of course.
No, but she definitely. I mean, it was basically what they do with Indians in Hollywood. It was just take some words out, and then that passes.
I think she also starred in those ninja movies. I think she was in a couple of those. Yeah, I think she was in a couple of those. I got to check. But you're right. It wasn't even the accent. They gave her some of the worst lines and expected her to pull it off. You can't say, and I'm going to read you some of Coe's, dramatic dialogue. What mean expendable? You come a long way, Rambo, to see empty camp. Maybe go America, live quiet life. Death everywhere. I want to live. What you want, Rambo? There's no way, regardless of the accent, that she could deliver this dialogue in any way that wasn't slightly offensive.
No time for love, Dr. Jones.
Exactly.
So what do we think about the rescue here? I mean, just the realism of it. What bothered me about it was that he sees the one guy and takes him like away from camp, but then comes back to camp. Big D, again, I don't know if you were involved in any sort of rescue training, but is this the way you want to take out or infiltrate a POW camp?
Well, I've never been on a solo mission to rescue POWs. I have had experience in jungle and prolonged experiences in the woods. And I know from my experience there that generally you want to keep your skin covered. Insects, snakes, the sun. It's good to wear some kind of clothing, but at 23 minutes, Rambo's got his shirts off, the guns are out. That's the worst thing you can do. I've been in full BDUs, and I've come back with like 30 ticks all over me. But Rambo, it works for him. For God's sake, during the escape, he pulls barbed wire apart. He climbs through it by himself, and he doesn't even get cut. So it wouldn't work for me, but maybe John's skin is some kind of camouflage because they don't seem to be able to track him very well.
Hey, how many explosive tipped arrows do they issue you guys when they send you into the jungle?
5. No,
5.
It was actually, we had 4 in the case, but if you just kept closing it and opening it, there would always be 4 more. It would refresh. It was like a video game.
Tax dollars at work.
But I don't even know why this rescue was necessary. Whether or not there's POW still there, yes, I can understand they want to go. But from the Vietnamese side, it seems like a lot of work. The Vietnam War has been over. Why are they still manning this camp like it's wartime? They have a war footing. They have guards and patrols. It's a lot of work. Not that I'm condoning killing the POWs, but why are they keeping them alive?
I think from what I understood, it was to spite the Americans who reneged on they were supposed to pay them off to get them back. But what doesn't make sense is that when this is being explained in the movie, they say that it was the Viet Cong, but these guys look like regulars. So I don't understand that part at all.
So they want to spite the Americans by continuing the expense and the effort of running a full camp to keep 15 guys. You could spite them by killing them and burying them, and then just denying they existed.
I imagine Pai Gow is pretty tired of maintaining that sludge pit just so they can torture a bunch of POWs.
That's a lot of work.
So Kobau escapes, but Rambo and the POW are recaptured and returned to the camp. There, Rambo learns that Soviet troops are arming and training the Vietnamese. He is turned over to the local liaison, Lieutenant Colonel Podovsky, and his right-hand man, Sergeant Yushin, for interrogation. Upon learning of Rambo's mission from intercepted missives, Podovsky demands that Rambo broadcast a message warning against further rescue missions for POWs under fatal cost. Meanwhile, Ko infiltrates the camp disguised as a prostitute and comes out of the hut in which Rambo is held captive. Rambo at first refuses to cooperate, but relents when the prisoner he tried to save is threatened. But instead of reading the scripted comments, Rambo directly threatens Murdoch, then subdues the Russian with Ko's help and escapes into the jungle. They kiss, and Rambo agrees to take Ko back to the United States. However, a small Vietnamese force attacks them, and Ko is killed. An enraged Rambo kills the soldiers and buries Ko's body in the mud.
You guys are both clearly more educated than I am. I'm not really familiar with the history. Were the Russians involved in Vietnam? Was that a thing?
Yeah, the primary backer of the communist Vietnamese was China. Russia, though, in the 80s was anywhere the Americans were, the Russians were there to counter. So we got to remember this is a post-Vietnam, as post-Vietnam can be. So Vietnam, we pulled out during the Nickson era. So now we're in the Reagan era. I don't know what the fuck the Russians are doing there.
I think Stallone's just got a weird beef with Russians.
No, the Russians were kind of, they weren't being very friendly at this time, especially after Rocky beats Drago. They were a perfect enemy.
If he dies, he dies.
And Gene and I had talked about the transformation of terrorists and the villains in movies, that this was the time where the Iron Curtain and the Russians, they were behind every communist threat that we viewed. And Roger was doing his what were the air raid warnings, the trainings where they'd set the alarms off and he'd have to hide under his desk. So the Russians were a big threat back in this time. But this is where the movie starts to kick into gear for me. The first half is a little bit of a prelude. We get to see Rambo's ability. But the movie for me kicks into gear with the torture scene. Pulling him out of the pit of sewage with all the animal waste. And he's tied to that ox yoke, and he's got the leeches all over him. And he seems to be wearing some kind of Speedo. I don't know. They couldn't have him naked. But this is brutal to watch. And I think it really kicks it into gear. We needed to see Rambo motivated. And that scene where he's being electrocuted on the mattress springs, and he's kind of smoking, and his hands, the close-ups, and he's like, his hands are convulsing. It got me mad. It was brutal. I wanted Rambo to kill as many of the Vietnamese soldiers as possible.
I was still mad at the guys who sent him out there. Rambo, we got the greatest technology available to keep you alive and safe on this mission. But they can't encrypt a radio transmission that kind of gives him away. Like, what's Murdoch doing?
Yeah, I mean, and I think Rambo echoes that anger because he's getting tortured by Russians and he's threatening Murdoch on the radio.
You have to admit, though, when you watch this and you see they kick the music in, the doom doom, and the camera gets closer to Rambo, doom doom, and he grabs the microphone, his knuckles crack, the lightning strikes, and he just smashes the Russian in the face after telling Murdoch, "I'm coming to get you." If that didn't get your heart rate going,
all right, you get points for that.
That shit was epic.
So the movie's got everything in it, though. You've got the action, you've got the suspense of is he going to make it out of this? You got the heroism and everything else, and of course you have to have a love story here, and that gets triggered between, of course, the only woman in the jungle who's not a prostitute, Ko Bao. So if you want to understand why Die Hard is such a good movie, then you got to understand why First Blood Part 2 is such a bad movie. So Rambo, as we've mentioned, has been stuck for hours. He's been shocked against a metal bed frame. And Ko Bao's comment on it is, "You hurt bad." And then she tears off a piece of her dress, and he's got a tiny cut on his face where it's the only visible part of his damage is a little tiny cut on his face where the red hot knife scarred him. And instead she proceeds to bandage his hand, presumably from the barbed wire. But by this point in the movie, Bruce Willis would be a charred, bloody mess, looking to find any cover he could and get the fuck out of the jungle.
So I don't know about you guys, but my wife, if I'm out like doing yard work and I'm getting sweaty, that is the last time that my wife wants to get romantic. If I come in sweaty from yard work, she's not wanting to touch me. Rambo's now been dunked in a sewage pit. He's been running around the jungle for about 24 hours. Sweaty, greasy, hair still looks great. And what she wants to do is get romantic.
Yeah, dude, but he hurt bad.
Maybe it's just the chemistry in the air, man. The guy's been in prison for 5 years. He's got to be hungry for something. That's got to be palpable.
She's obviously just trying to get a ticket back to the U.S., right?
Yeah, I didn't want to be the cynical guy here, but she's pushing that agenda pretty damn hard.
Oh, death everywhere, Rambo. Me go with you. They haven't even kissed at this point. She's already making plans for him to take her back. But the love story, perfect in this movie, only lasts about 25 seconds. She gets shot by about 35 guys, and we are off and running to the hunting montage. But not before Rambo takes time to bury the body.
So using his weapons and guerrilla training, Rambo systematically dispatches the numerous Soviet and Vietnamese soldiers sent after him. After bravely surviving a barrel bomb dropped by Yushin's helicopter, Rambo climbs on board, throws Yushin out of the cabin in a brief but intense fight, and takes control. He lays waste to the prison camp and kills all the remaining enemy forces before extracting the POWs and heading toward friendly territory in Thailand. Podolsky, pursuing in an Mi-24 helicopter gunship, seemingly shoots him down and moves in for the kill. Having faked the crash, Rambo kills him with a rocket launcher.
Yeah, so the revenge montage, epic. It's got some great scenes in there. Again, he shoots maybe 30 people with arrows. He does, some decoy making noise. The Russian soldiers, he stabs them in the neck, shoots a couple guys, pins him to the tree. Did this precede Predator? Do we know?
Yes.
We sure?
Yeah, I think Predator was 86, I want to say.
Okay, so if this preceded Predator, then
It
Predator just totally copied that mud scene where he's up against the wall, he covers himself in mud. How do you cover your whole body perfectly so nobody can see you without help?
There's a huge difference between this mud scene and the Predator mud scene. Predator mud scene made sense because he was trying to block out his thermal signature, right? And also, unlike the Predator mud scene, in this one, fuck covering himself in mud and how he covered his whole body. How the fuck did he wash the mud off? Because Sylvester Stallone goes from Swamp Thing to squeaky clean in like 2 seconds flat. And I'm not just talking like less mud on his body. His pants are now cleaned and pressed. His hair is like a raven whirlwind of fury. Like, he looks squeaky clean and kind of oily too. So I don't know how the fuck. I mean, it was raining, but it wasn't raining that hard.
You talked about Swamp Thing. The one kill that kind of got me, the soldiers are walking through and he ingeniously uses all these vines that are on the ground to somehow snare one of the Russian soldiers and pull him into that little cave and stab him.
In silence, mind you.
Yeah, first I don't think that would work. Imagine Rambo starts pulling these vines and the Russian soldiers just stand there looking at him like, what are you doing, dude? There's a lot more effective ways to kill somebody than try to drag him into your cave.
What I didn't understand is, where was the lack of help? Rambo's dragging me with a bunch of vines into this cave. Help!
Yeah, it was kind of just a low hiss, like, So as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, like, the helicopter is pretty cool. I'm like, it's got an impressive armament, going on. But the helicopters made no sense in this movie. First of all, the chopper's flying so low to the water, it's practically like a submarine. Rambo hops aboard. Why are you flying a helicopter that low? And then I can buy that the smaller helicopter, because Russians apparently have varying degrees of monstrous gunships, was carrying an armament of a barrel bomb, rockets, a 40 cal, and a minigun. But I want to know, when he attacks the prison camp, who the fuck was shooting the minigun? It had fixed sights on it. Apparently somebody was supposed to be operating it, but maybe he's also got the power of telekinesis.
Now, forget about shooting the minigun and just, you said he blows up the camp. How the hell did he know where the POWs were kept? He's blowing up seemingly every building. After the first escape, the Vietnamese soldiers might have moved them. It would have been ironic if Rambo lands, goes for the rescue, and finds one of the buildings had been filled with POWs, and he just killed them all.
For starters, I feel like that the minigun in the helicopter was controlled by Rambo through some sort of joystick thing. We talked about, there you go. The big thing, so there's maybe 100 guys on the ground shooting rifles at him, and not one person bothers to shoulder a rifle. Like, helicopters, they're not that tough. If 100 dudes actually took a minute and aimed, Rambo's going down.
Fuck yes. And they're all shooting AKs. That's a 7.62. That's going to do some damage. It's going to rip through that tin can aluminum body of a helicopter. And we talk about, like, the fact that Rambo can do everything. He's a master of stealth. He can take pictures. He's a master of weapons. He can break rocks. He can fly a helicopter. But did you see that pilot when Rambo finally throws out, like, the Russian tough guy? He just decides to bail and jump at like 1,500 feet. Was that the right move for a pilot to do? Rambo's coming, but was there a better way?
Yeah, I appreciated the fact that they didn't show it was underneath him, so I would just kind of keep my fingers crossed for the guy. They're like, maybe it was water. I don't know, but he did. I think, again, this is a statement on how lethal Rambo is. Like, I'll take my chances with gravity. Gravity is not as certain as Rambo.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, the air to ground combat was some bullshit, although the napalm explosion was pretty cool. But the air to air combat, what'd you guys make of that?
Well, you talked about that. I think was the Mi-24, that gunship. Mm-hmm. That thing is like a tank. Isn't that the same helicopter from Red Dawn?
I believe so, yeah. It was an iconic Russian attack helicopter at the time. I think it makes another appearance in Rambo 3 as well.
I felt like that helicopter battle is a complete joke. He's got a helicopter full of buddies. They get hit, and then they're just spinning out of control until one of the guys goes, "Rambo, the tail's on fire." And somehow Rambo takes that as his cue to just magically straighten that thing out, keep going straight. And then, Russian guy's like, I got him now. A big explosion. I don't know what those missiles hit, but they still exploded enough to create a giant cloud of smoke that allows Rambo to escape and lie in wait.
What about when they're all the POWs are running to helicopter in the first place? One of the Russian soldiers sits up, shoots a POW mid-back, right in the spine with an AK, And the dude somehow survives all the way to the end. So these POWs are tough. In my experience, I was at the 101st Airborne in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So we were air assault there. So we would use helicopters. We never flew around really with the doors opened. That shit, you got 5 or 6 POWs in the back there. They're really emaciated. They're skinny. They're probably disoriented. And you are banking and turning. He probably would have lost half the POWs out the doors.
I mean, forget having him fall out the doors. You got when he uses the rocket launcher, everybody that backblast is going to kill everybody inside the helicopter.
Fuck yes. Like when you shoot an AT-4, you got to turn around and say backblast area clear. Because what comes out of the back of that is like fragments of plastic and fire, and you would have scorched you would have at least blinded the remaining POWs.
Well, apparently the enemy's inability to fire lethal shots, how they got so many POWs in the first place.
Speaking of not being able to shoot, the worst part of the movie to me is when the guy is the guy that gets killed by the single explosive arrow. It's like the iconic moment, right, in First Blood Part 2, where he uses the explosive arrow on one guy. And everybody talks about the arrow part, that it was overkill. You know, why did he use an explosive arrow on one guy? But I think that pales in comparison to the guy missed with an entire magazine and a rifle and a pistol from like 10 yards away. And again, you see Weird Al making fun of this. I think every movie has made fun of this type of scene where Rambo's out in the open and somehow nobody can hit him.
It's because they started playing his theme. You could hear it, dome dome, and the rattlesnake, dome dome. That's like a force field. You're not going to hit Rambo. But did you have a problem with it? A lot of times we talked about Schwarzenegger and Commando. He's a bigger dude. It's clunkier. It didn't feel right. Stallone, if you want to knock him for being cheesy and dead-eyed in his delivery, his physical scenes and the action in this movie, I thought were top-notch. Even today, it was fun. The action moved. The scenes were believable. He seemed stealthy, whereas, Schwarzenegger is clunky and fake. Did you not like the action scenes as much as you guys are banging on them?
I will admit that it is a movie that moves. It's kinetic, and everyone's running around and doing their thing. And it's convincing in the sense that like kids playing war is convincing. The whole movie has this real meta feel because it is so corny that I can understand where all the satire comes from. But at the same time, I feel like it's almost a satire of itself. It's so bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's simple things you can do to keep all the great parts of the movie, the way it moves, how tight it is, and you just change certain things like having, I don't know, when you're using an M60, actually having ammunition feeding into it. That would be helpful, or when a helicopter's been hit and goes down, maybe you don't take off in it again.
Oh, come on, but we're dealing with Commando at this time. He set a claymore up at the side of a building, you remember? And that blew up like 8 buildings. So yes, that's ridiculous. Here, the fact that he had maybe like 50 rounds on the belt when he's running around shooting it indiscriminately, that's not as big of a faux pas as some of the other movies of this same time and genre.
I fucking love at the end when he wraps the belt around his arm, because that's a really good idea when you're firing an automatic weapon. So returning to the base with the POWs, Rambo, after using the helicopter's machine gun to destroy Murdoch's office, confronts the terrified man with his knife, demanding that Murdoch rescue the remaining POWs. Troutman then confronts Rambo and tries to convince him to return home now that he's been pardoned. An angry Rambo responds that he only wants his country to love its soldiers as much as its soldiers love it. The film credits roll as Rambo walks off into the distance while his mentor watches him.
Okay, so at the beginning of the movie, they're in the Thai base. Rambo's got to get on a jet and fly maybe 25, 30 minutes to get to the drop zone. Rambo in a helicopter that's smoking, that's obviously been damaged somehow. He decides to risk it and fly back. Obviously, people are seeing it and makes it, this 40-minute trip back? Seemed a bit dangerous. You might wanted to land, maybe call for help. They could have just crashed at the end.
I mean, I was kind of surprised that the Vietnamese and the Russians expended this much man and material just to go after this one guy. And at that point, why not just go all out and scramble some jets? You have Russian helicopters now going down with an officer in it. But when he gets there, Big D, you posted that GIF on Twitter of the machine gun scene where he blows up all the computers and then he's just shooting the M60 straight into the air. And I know that destruction of the computer is making a statement, but the computer isn't even remotely a villain. It did nothing wrong. The movie keeps returning to this anti-digital motif, but it never establishes why. And he doesn't hurt Murdoch, who fucking left him there to die, who orchestrated, what he expected to be Rambo's death. What the fuck did the computer do to deserve death?
I think you're missing it. The computers are machinery. It's not technology. It's how those computers and the weapons and Rambo, the government views all of them as assets that are expendable, that can be lost. So he's showing that it's not all about, the asset, that there's people behind it.
Well, that's a big stretch. I'll tell you, I didn't get that message from this movie. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I'll tell you this, he doesn't touch that Coke machine.
The movie, to this point, has been almost flawless. It's been almost perfect. I'm telling you, I'm loving it. The it's moving. There's a whole bunch of set pieces that were really fun. But then it's coming to this crescendo, a giant finish, and it just ends with a thud. John, how are you going to survive? Day by day. He just walks off towards the fence, and they start playing that absolutely horrible Frank Stallone song. I felt like it was a parody. I thought it was written for like Team America instead of Rambo.
The Incredible Hulk TV series, like that was out from started in 78 to 82. And I think that this was an homage to the end of The Incredible Hulk when he would just kind of slink off into the, this is Bruce Bannon, man.
And he does still have his survival knife.
No, but come on. I understand that Sly wanted to hook up his brother, but did you need this absolutely awful song? Compared to this song, that Toby Keith song, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, that shit is an epic song compared to this piece of garbage.
Yeah, it's like it completely deflates you after getting pumped up, watching America win, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
Listen, you can't bash on that song and still love Lee Greenwood at the same time. I think one of your statements is a lie.
No, I'm gonna go look up the lyrics for you. Peace in Our Lifetime, that is a piece of shit song. Lee Greenwood sings about, if I had to start my life off with my children and my wife. He's telling a story.
This shit right now.
Okay, and Frank Stallone. I'm going to read the lyrics.
Can you deliver them in your Playing with the Boys voice? Because that really set it off for me.
What voice did I use?
Oh no, you just did it. You did it. You did playing with the boys, playing with the boys.
Playing with the boys. Okay, so here we go. Also, he just copied his brother's haircut.
That was all Italians had that haircut in the 80s.
I'm Googling Lee Greenwood lyrics. We're going to do worst lyric for worst lyric here. Lee Greenwood versus Frank Stallone.
What the fuck is this? How is it so hard to find lyrics? Peace in Our Lifetime. Okay. Oh, there we go.
It's not hard to find lyrics. It's hard to find lyrics to that song.
Okay, so it's a bad song when each of the verses and lines is 3 words. So peace in our lifetime. We gave our hearts. We gave it all. Flame in the fire, burning forevermore. The sorrow is believing, honor and truth. Gray spires climbing, wrapped around our youth. Peace in our lifetime. Remember the call. Oh, a cheer for my brothers, thinking of them all. This song is a piece of shit. It's terrible. This is no Lee Greenwood.
It's some real 7th grade poetry. I'll give you that.
Yeah, so read Lee Greenwood. It's a story. It tugs on your heartstrings.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife.
I thank my lucky stars
I'll just let you
that I'm
this.
living here today.
Oh man,
because the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free.
I gotta go, guys.
You gotta pay for any more.
I can't tell you how many awful memories are associated with Lee Greenwood.
So now both of you guys made the note though that the final speech that was the real mover of this movie that Rambo delivers. What it is that the driver of the entire movie, what he wants out of this mission. Why is he doing it at all? Why wouldn't he just stay in prison? It's safer.
You got to remember that the script was written by James Cameron. Did all the action. Stallone did all the political commentary. So any of the quieter moments, like on the riverboat or here, it's Stallone. So in the first movie, he tried to really address the problem with POWs and PTSD and soldiers returning home. Here, he turns this into like a comical superhero action movie. And I think he had to throw these in so people didn't go, what are you doing? You know, it'd be like if the follow-up to Schindler's List was Inglourious Basterds, you'd kind of be like, a little different movie here. So he throws in a speech that, you know, ties it up nicely. I want what they want. And every other guy who came over here and spilled his guts and gave everything he had once for our country to love us as much as we love it. That's all I want.
It's pretty presumptive on his part to just assume that. I bet some of those guys are going to be okay with a shower and some Band-Aids.
Who, the POWs?
Yeah. At that point, I don't care if America loves me. I'm just glad I'm not in the sludge pit anymore.
I think, you know, from a perspective of the statement, though, is most people, when they think of Rambo, they think of this Rambo, or they think of Rambo from part 3. They don't think of Rambo from part 1. And it is funny to watch that message erode over time, you know, as each sequel comes out. But I think this was kind of the last breath or the last gasp of this attempt to make an appeal for the Vietnam veterans and for the soldier. And then after that, it just went off the rails.
It went off the rails. You mean at the end of Rambo 3, where they give that little closing shot where it says, this movie is dedicated to the valiant and brave warriors in Afghanistan, which eventually turned into the Taliban? You mean that? Yeah, a couple wrong turns here and there. But Rambo was everything that was, you know, good and strong with red-blooded, coke-drinking America in the mid-'80s.
All right, now comes the point in the movie where we rate it. I think we know where everyone stands so far, but we do use the Shat meter. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, the Shat meter operates from a 0 to 5 scale, 0 being a perfect movie, 5 being horrible. So we'll say 0 wipes in this case is a special forces survival knife, always shiny no matter how deep it's been plunged into filthy communist guts. And 5 wipes is the ox yoke latrine torture. It's like a bath in the piss and shit of mysterious jungle horrors. So that is the rating scale. Big D, why don't we start with you? What is your rating for Rambo First Blood Part 2?
So this might shock you and some people. This is a 1 wipe movie.
Jesus Christ.
Ugh.
This is the American sniper of the mid-'80s. You know, granted, we've become more realistic in our depiction of war, but Rambo served as a proxy for us, the viewers, the American public, where it let Americans go back and try to fix the Vietnam War. You know, at this point, you got to think, I think right before the movie came out, we had gone into Grenada and we had our first little victory, but America wasn't feeling too good about itself. So Rambo gave the nation some pride. I mean, for God's sake, it turned the word Rambo into both a noun and a verb. You know, it's part of the popular culture, the vocabulary. If you say Rambo, everyone knows what it is. The action's exciting. There's not a boring moment. Yes, it's racially insensitive in a lot of parts, but as a time capsule for the time, it was a fun movie. Other than the end, which falls flat, it's as good as I remember it. I think it's fun. It doesn't take itself too serious, and it's much better than the other. How could you say that this is worse than like a Die Hard? It's exciting. It's fun. It's a 1 wipe movie. I don't care what you say.
Holy shit. You're comparing this to Die Hard? Die Hard's a masterpiece.
No, Rambo's a masterpiece.
All right, King B, I sense that you disagree. So Big D's giving it 1 wipe. What do you got there, King B?
4 wipes, almost 5. You know, I've seen a lot of parody war movies, movies that I realize now were making fun of this movie. And I was always struck by, you know, how corny they were. This movie's corny and incredibly staged. It's literally the Max Fisher school play at the end of Rushmore. The dialogue's awful. The sets are terrible and weak. The dialogue might as well have been written by the same computer system that chose Rambo and those 2 other candidates for this movie. Everyone in the movie is just disinterested and wooden. I can't buy into it ever. The bad English, it's not racially insensitive. It's fucking humiliating and just awful. It doesn't hold up to today by any means. And I can't blame Stallone. I would say if you're looking at American heroes, I would never give it to Rambo. I think Rocky is a million times better and really shows the potential for what a good American movie with Stallone in it could be.
All right, so that's 1 wipe from Big D, Dick Ebert, 4 wipes from King B. I'm going to go in right, kind of cut the middle there, 3 wipes. Yes, this movie is a turd that makes little to no sense, but Rambo does something few modern masterpieces can. It tells a complete tale in 90 minutes,
Yes.
and that's what I liked about it. It moved. It's shorter than some TV episodes. It's a little action, a little romance, a little drama, a little fashion show. I respect that it never really slowed down, and I'm also amazed at how a deeply dramatic first film, The First Blood, was quickly flipped into a macho action franchise. They did it almost seamlessly. Also, oddly, Stallone is really good in this. Like, he is Rambo. I don't feel like I'm watching somebody act like Rambo. Rambo is this sort of sullen, he's got feelings but doesn't really know how to express them. Again, very much like Rocky, and I think that is Stallone himself, really coming through. So for me, it's a 3 wiper, which brings us to an average rating of 2.6 wipes repeating. Big D, where does that put us in the pantheon of Shat the movies?
So again, when we vote and it goes all over the place, it always seems to settle in the right place. This is number 20. It is between Rocky 4 at 19 and Pretty Woman at 21. Rocky 4, Rambo First Blood Part 2, they're close to the same movie.
I got it. No, you're crazy. We don't have enough time for me to get into how much I love Rocky and Rocky 4, but you're insane if you think that this is almost as good as Rocky 4 is near perfect film.
No, but there are flaws in Rocky 4. Rocky 4, again, leans very heavily on a depiction of a technology being the bad guy and doing your roots. It has a big montage in it. The Russians are depicted as flat, villainous characters. It's, again, a Cold War, proxy movie. There's a lot of similarities between this and Rocky 4. Now, Rocky 4, I would turn around and watch that again right now. I don't want to watch Rambo again for, at least not sober, for another year.
Thank you for not bringing up the robot butler.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You think Rocky 4 is perfect? You got Paulie drunk stumbling around Siberia. He's trying to have sex with Rocky's robot. You have a montage where they play No Easy Way Out. The entire 4-minute song they play. So 4 minutes of Rocky is a montage.
It's not Lee Greenwood.
You got a man getting killed in the ring and then an unsanctioned fight going on immediately after. This guy would be probably arrested at least, not allowed to go back to his own country.
Talk about the promoters. There's no ringside doctor. Rocky's sitting there as he's bleeding out, yelling, get help, and nobody comes.
I cried at the death of Apollo Creed.
I did too.
Yeah, Rocky should have thrown in the towel. Throw in the damn towel.
Number 3 is still my favorite Rocky movie, though.
Is that Mr. T?
Mr. T.
It's Hulk Hogan.
Thunder Lips as Hulk Hogan. My favorite is There Is No Tomorrow. It's an amazing scene in that movie. That's my favorite line.
So basically what we've got here is that all Rambo did was make us want to watch Rocky, which, by the way, as a kid, I got the two characters confused all the time, and I didn't know why Rocky didn't just use a gun. So that was a whole different thing. But we're going to go ahead and close the doors on Rambo First Blood Part 2 and look forward to the next movie, which I think everybody is excited about.
Oh, Jesus. Next week is one of the legends. It's one of the movies that was, you always think of those tentpole movies that you're excited to do when you start a project like this. The category was Best Bullies from 95 Friday, 88 Heathers, the 1984 classic Karate Kid, and the winner, the epic, legendary 1985 Back to the Future.
I think the beautiful part about Back to the Future is it shows us what you could do in 85 if you wanted to make a good movie. I'm excited about this one because I've always loved Back to the Future, and I can't wait to see if it holds up. This is truly a test for me to see if this movie is as good as I remember it. I wasn't a big fan of Back to the Future 3. Back to the Future 2 was okay, but 1 really hit home for me. I loved it. I loved all the scenes. The Chuck Berry scene was goddamn amazing, and so I'm really excited for this one.
Listeners, write in. Tell us, should we bring back King B? Does he deserve the honor for Back to the Future?
Jeez, put the pressure on.
Well, we'll see. It's democracy. Last podcast you said that the little man's vote doesn't count. I want to reverse that trend. Power to the people.
I am thankful you guys have had me back a second time. I hope I did a little bit better this time. It's definitely it's hard work. My hat is off to the both of you. And again, thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. On Facebook, search for Shat the Movies Podcast. The website is shatthemovies.com, and our email address is hosts@shatthemovies.com, where you can write into us about the King Bee, write into us about Rambo, write in suggestions for movies we should watch. King Bee, if they're trying to find you online, where can they find you?
You know, I'm going to start a new project. You can find me on Twitter at Phantom King Bee. If you're interested in the art I make, you can find me at King Bee Workshop on Instagram. Or if you're interested in what I do all day long, you can find me at King Bee Adventure on Instagram, Twitter, and someplace else. I'm sure I will figure it out later.
All right, we're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Game of Thrones, Westworld, Taboo, and American Gods. You can find all that information on our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week when we fawn over the 1985 classic, Back to the Future. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis.